You're listening to episode number 10 of the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. Today I've got Christoper Matos-Rogers on the show. He's a green realtor in Atlanta, Georgia, and he's one of this year's Evergreen Award winners from NAR GREEN. In this episode, Christoper is going to share with us why he feels it's important to market to this underrepresented segment of consumers. Not only are green and energy efficient features a benefit to homeowners, but as the industry changes and more are providing sustainable solutions, ROI of green is becoming more visible. It's a huge opportunity to serve and market to these clients, so I'm super excited to have Christoper here on the show. At the NAR conference this year, he's one of the panel speakers. It's called Why Add Green to Your Team? So if you want to know how you can leverage the surging demand of wellness or green in your business, stay tuned. Okay, let's grow. Welcome to the Real Estate Marketing Podcast, where we explore a unique strategy no one is talking about that will enable you to engage more people with authentic conversations about your business more often. And it's called Wellness Real Estate. Not sure what that is or how it can help you as an agent? Well, that's what this podcast is all about. In fact, wellness real estate is growing so rapidly that it is projected to be nearly $870 billion by 2027. I'm Sheila Alston, and I'm your host. I'm also the founder of Healthy Home Media, where I help agents all over the country leverage this new trend in the industry to spark new conversations that will get people to listen to you and notice your brand. So if you're tired of spinning your wheels without any leads or sales to show for it, then stay tuned. I guarantee this podcast is not like any you've heard before. Welcome to the Wellness Real Estate Podcast. Welcome, Christoper.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. You know, the reason I brought you here is because I think there's so many agents who think that people just don't care about being green and that there's no ROI in it. Or maybe that it's just not sustainable as a business owner to market to this niche. And I know you've been a green agent for the last few years, and I know that you're very involved at an association level. So I'd love to have you share your experience on what you see happening in the marketplace and how it's shifted. But maybe before we do that, I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you got started as a green agent.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I'm so excited to be here. And I just finished my 6th year of real estate. Before real estate, I worked in marine biology. And before that, I was an entrepreneur, and I come from a background of a family that's largely been in the residential sector. So from builders, architects, realtors, tradesmen. So I kind of jokingly say I came back to the family business, after kind of going a different path for a while. But for me, why I finally made the choice to come back or to join real estate was that in 2015, my husband and I were looking for the house that we now live in. And we had, the year previously, we had sold a smart home. And that was also an emerging technology, right? Mm-hmm. And we couldn't find an agent that could represent or understand what it was like selling a smart home. And so fast forward to 2015, we both already drove fully electric cars. So, there are certain challenges and thought processes that you have as a buyer when you rely on your house to charge your car. And also driving to electric vehicles, we knew we wanted to add solar to preferably to whatever house we purchased, to help offset our vehicles and, continue being more green. And so in Atlanta, we were far from the only folks doing that. We had a tax credit at the time in the state. And so the electric vehicle market was, and still is, quite huge. So we knew we weren't the only folks, but there was no real estate agent serving this niche. So 6 months later or less, I got my license. I left marine biology, and I just immediately set out that I was going to, to be this niche for Atlanta, but not only just, work in my business. Mm-hmm. We had to bring other agents into awareness that this stuff was already here. It's not some future Jetsons world that you can plan, for the next decade. It was already here in 2015. And so, we've done a lot of association work, as you mentioned. And again, a lot of that is because it's not just us. We're not going to change the market on our own. We have to have other agents. We're going to have other agents co-opting on the deal. And so it's amazing now to look back 6 years and see what's happened. And now there's just so much potential in front of us.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like green features, even smart home features, have been around for longer than 5-6 years. But I mean, the good news is that there's so many more businesses that are doing that, that costs have come way down. I think some of those misconceptions that being green is really expensive isn't really the case anymore. But it's still surprising to me how few green agents there are. And it's unfortunate, because as a homeowner, if you want to get your ROI back in those features,
Certainly.
you really need to have someone representing you that understands them.
Exactly. And that is the huge piece. If you use just any agent, or an agent that doesn't believe or understand the features, you're never going to realize your ROI and your payback when you go to sell.
Right. Right. So do you see that there's still a huge gap, or what have you seen change over the past, 6 years?
Well, the encouraging thing is that consumer awareness is off the charts, right? And even adoption. As you mentioned, the costs have come down. There's more players in the field. Consumer awareness is way up. COVID has obviously impacted a lot of this, as well as people think about home health and home resiliency, and just that the fact that they're using more energy working and living their whole life from home. There's more awareness around it. I will say on the agent side, we still struggle. For example, we are, like, my team is still not getting a big piece of the solar homes that sell here in the state. Mm-hmm. They are still going to other agents that are connected with those people in their sphere. People aren't yet at this point saying, okay, I have a house that's a little different. Let me go find an agent that really knows this. We do interact with some of those people, and we interact with a lot of people that aren't selling yet. So eventually, they may end up selling. But we're still seeing a lot of folks that have these homes, sell them with agents that helped them buy maybe years ago, or that's the biggest agent in their neighborhood, whatever it is, the typical metrics that we think about with real estate agents. And I get all the horror stories, because a lot of times after they've spoken with their agent, especially when it comes to solar, they'll reach back out to their installer and say, hey, my agent said this about solar. And then they usually get connected with me at that point. So I've heard, the horror stories. If they already have an agent, there's really nothing I can do. I can't, there's an ethical line there. But I hear the horror stories a lot. So on the agent side, we still have a lot of work to do. And that's a consumer piece as well, to try and make consumers aware that there are these agents out here. Well, that they're leaving money on the table. And, I know some of the agents around here, when we've talked about solar, they don't want to have anything to do with it, because there's a lot of complicated stuff that maybe they just don't know about, whether it's a lease or whether it's owned. And it seems like it just complicates the escrow process, and they don't want to lose the sale. But I think that that's, not where you want to come from when you're, acting out of service and you want to get the best ROI for your client. And it just is such a huge benefit to maybe just have partners around you that can help educate you and your clients. Agreed. And we haven't really been affected by the leasing situation here in Georgia because of our power rate structure. Mm-hmm. Our rates are about half of what you guys pay in California, if not less. So most solar here is owned. Okay. But what we see agents tell people is outdated information. They don't want to have to understand or try to sell the solar, so they will say that it negatively impacts value, that nobody wants it. They'll tell people that it's cheaper to take it off your house and take it with you. And that all comes from, outdated information. Maybe you heard it from somebody else, you heard it from somebody else. And they're not, and again, kind of what you mentioned too, there are some that just don't want to deal with having to think about that. And they're definitely not marketing what the benefits of solar are, so that a buyer who would be interested, would understand what solar is, right? Yeah. I know in California, the new mandate is that all the new homes have to have solar. So at least over here, pretty soon, I think that people are going to expect that you have solar, and it's going to be a negative if you don't. What's the situation in Atlanta? So right now it is still folks who want to have it. It's, there are definitely the early adopters, kind of the people that do it for environmental reasons. There's the people that are doing it increasingly for resilience. Electric vehicle owners are also really just like, they are probably the best market opportunity for somebody who's wanting to sell solar, is to gear toward electric vehicle owners, because electric vehicles tend to be kind of a gateway to a electric and efficient lifestyle, because they are a huge user of electricity. Here in Georgia, it's about $25 a month to add an EV, which is nothing. But people do freak out and think it's going to cost them hundreds of dollars. So they start watching their energy bill like a hawk. And when you start watching, you learn, right? And you
Yeah.
start seeing things and you want to cut down. Maybe you want to go solar, like a big thing here. Even though we are overwhelmingly natural gas powered, we also have a lot of solar and hydro in Georgia. There's still that classic conversation that, an electric vehicle is just a coal car, even though that's not the facts. So there's also a lot of electric vehicle owners looking to solar to stop that rhetoric as well.
Even today, people who have electric cars, you're early adopters, because I just read some stat that in 2010, there were barely any electrical vehicles, and now there's 1.3 million. And that's still not a lot, but it's huge growth.
And it is. It's really exciting. We've driven electric for almost 8 years at this point, and to see where it was even just 3 years ago. I mean, the growth has really come out with Tesla coming out with their we'll call them more affordable models. Those have really just, a 10-time growth factor. And then with other manufacturers also coming out with more compelling competitive SUVs or EVs, it's really changed that space. So it's really awesome to see that from a charging infrastructure perspective, just to cars on the road.
Yeah. So was it really difficult, you said, when you were looking for a home, just to figure out, isn't it as simple as hiring an electrician to put in a special, plug-in in your garage? Is it that simple, or?
Well, yes and no, right? So yes, you do call an electrician in to add an outlet potentially if there's not already one. In Atlanta, we've had a ordinance for several years, I think 4 years at this point, that all new construction is required to be EV ready. So they already have an outlet in the garage, so you're ready to go. You just have to put the equipment in. And even our utility here gives builders a $100 incentive to add it when they're building. So we've got a lot of stuff around there. But if you're buying an existing home like we were, there's a lot of factors that go in. What is the situation in the panel? If you're looking at a 1950s, 1960s home, does it have an original 100 amp panel? And that's probably not going to work with all your other appliances plus, a 30 or 40 amp EV charger. So you may have to upgrade your panel. That's an extreme scenario. Usually it's more of, where's your panel located in relation to where your cars will be parking. So that can give you a wide range of, it's going to be $500 to install, or it's going to be $1,000 or a little bit more. When we were looking, we had to look at panels, we had to look at, locations. The first house we had under contract was very cool, mid-century modern, but it had a creek that went across the front of the property. So the house was on the opposite side of the creek from the garage, the carport. Beautiful house, like really cool. It was going to cost $5,000 to get electricity out to the carport. So we ended up not going with that house, but that was, one of those examples that we learned. And generally speaking, a lot of folks who end up buying electric cars, it is a little simpler. They generally find a house that has space in the panel. And again, it's just a conversation of how long is the run from the panel box to the garage.
And you don't need to have a special electrician that understands electric vehicles. It's just anyone.
No, that's, and a lot of that conversation comes up with a lot of high performance stuff. They're just putting an oven outlet or a dryer outlet. There's nothing special in that regard. There's nothing, and to be honest, a lot of electricians have really, I'm sure California is the same, Atlanta's a huge EV market. So they've all are chomping at this market because it's, it's easy money and there's a lot of people that want it. So there's nothing special about it, but you also won't struggle to find an electrician that probably is marketing to it.
Yeah, so I'm interested to know, because I do think that there's a lot of kickback from agents thinking that it's such a small niche. How can I market to this small niche and lose, I'll lose business? So I'm interested in knowing, that's how you started. How do you see, have you been able to build a business just around energy efficient homes, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, so first of all, I part of that is, that's that classic scarcity fear mindset, right? I have to take all of it because I need all the possibilities, because it may be only 1% of everybody's going to like me, right? But the problem is, everybody's a real estate agent, or a vast number, right? How do you stand out from that crowd? And what I can tell you is, and other leaders across the country are the same way, that have really dove deep into this, Ultimately, we don't only do high performance homes. We work a lot with people that are aspirational to that, right? So we can help them buy an existing home and then over time figure out how they can make that home green, whether it's a full retrofit, whether it is replacing and electrifying gas appliances as they age. But on the other side of that is a great opportunity to provide value and stay engaged with past clients, because almost all agents really suck at that, right? If you have a closing and you don't really stay in touch, and if you know that you need to be engaged, then agents start wondering, well, what do I do, right? How do I reach out to somebody and not feel salesy? How do I add value? Send them a CMA? No, that's like what everybody else is doing.
Right.
But instead, if you can, be an expert on green, and help people of all lifestyles. People are into it because they want to save money, right? People are into it because they have family members with health issues. There are people who are in it because they care about climate change and sustainability. So whatever their reason is, there's just not many of us out here that are knowledgeable on this. And so being able to be a source and connect them with a vendor or provide oh, when you went to a heat pump water heater, what was your experience, right? So that's another part, is do a lot of this yourself. Don't only just be preaching it, be living it. That makes it a lot more authentic, and it makes it a lot easier to speak. And honestly, we all should be doing what we can, piece by piece.
Well, and it gives you content to just be sharing too. But I love what you said about how it just keeps you connected to your past clients, because really, if people are staying in their homes 5 to 15 years, you can't just be sending them CMAs or wanting them to move every year so that you have a client every year.
Exactly.
And if you don't talk to them for 5 years until they're ready to move, they'll think, okay, so how have you been my agent for these past 5 years? So I love that you have now content that you share and that you can stay connected with them and help them in other ways.
And they'll even reach out to you. In fact, I had a past client. They sold their house here in Atlanta last year. They moved to Connecticut, and then they actually relocated again down to Miami. They just reached out to me this past weekend and were asking about electric vehicles. They're looking to switch both their cars, and so they were asking about electric vehicles. So I didn't have to reach out to him. If he reached out to me, that's the best kind.
Yeah, well, and I love that. What I love about it is, I think as a realtor, you're always struggling to how to get real estate into the conversation, when you're talking to people. Exactly. And how do you say, without being so salesy, do you know somebody who's looking to buy or sell? But if you're talking about things that are related to home and how you can improve the health of the home or the efficiency of the home or the sustainability of the home, you're still talking about the home, you're showing your expertise, but you're not trying to get them to move or hire you as their listing agent.
Well, you're building that long-term relationship, especially if they do end up making a lot of these improvements. You already know a lot about the house by the time that they do decide to sell, and they are more likely to come and call you because, again, you're an expert, you've proven value, you know a lot about their house, and they know that you'll be able to sell these benefits to somebody else.
Yeah, well, so what about the agents who think, well, I'm not the expert in green right now. How can I market to these people if I only know a little bit?
Well, first and foremost, do not pretend to be an expert or know something. That is the way to damage the movement, to damage yourself. But start where you are. So I've had a lot of agents reach out to me this year, especially newer agents, some of them that are in apartments, for example, or leasing. And the truth is, we all have a sustainability story, right? So even if your sustainability story is not specifically about the transaction, you should be storytelling about your efforts to compost in an apartment, right? Is there a service in your area that allows you to do that? What other things did you do in a rental situation? And the great key about that is that there are many people going through the same situation you are that are renters. I'm part of an influencer group in the green building space. That's a national program. It's overwhelmingly building professionals. They overwhelmingly are millennials and renters, right? And so to hear all of them about the things they want to do, but they can't because it's a rental, there are some opportunities, there are some limitations, but the thing is, they are likely to become a buyer. And so the thing is if you can provide value and community for them in their rental situation, you could likely be the agent that they reach out to when they decide to buy their first place.
Well, and there's a huge opportunity also to grow a referral network with all of these green providers around you. I mean,
Certainly.
if you are the the agent that works with a certain green builder in your area and they refer you to, someone who needs to buy a lot, there you've got a sale, and
Exactly.
solar people or just so it's really important, I think, that you don't expect to be the person who knows it all, but you surround yourself with all of these other green professionals so that you have a network to rely on and to refer. And then you are just becoming the industry expert for this niche in your area. And like you've experienced, there's not a lot of us.
Yes. Well, and that's the key there is patience. People have to be patient. We are in this to build a, tongue-in-cheek sustainable business. We're not just looking to do the next 30 or 60 days. And I know the importance of that when you're new, but, future you is going to be thankful that you put this time and this investment of whether money, time, into this, because you will start having those natural referrals that happen later on. If you're in this business, you should be planning on being in it for several years, maybe even decades. And your future success comes on, what you did in the beginning. In the beginning, it's hard. And if you are struggling to make business in the beginning, I think number one, understanding that you're not suddenly going to get everybody who wants to buy a greenhouse or a healthy home or a luxury home to come to you. Start working with somebody somewhere, right? And you can still be having these conversations, having this content, all while doing that. And eventually you create the sphere in the market that you want. I'm 6 years into this at this point. So that's one of the things is a lot of people in the last about 18 months have started to see me more across the country, and they see me now, and I didn't just roll out of bed like this.
Right.
This took, a fair amount of experience that I had before being in the industry, but also at this point, 6 years and a few months of just consistently showing up, being involved, and I'll say key is that I live this lifestyle. So it's not that I just, I show up in a gas guzzling SUV and live in a drafty historic home and, do all these non-sustainable things and then preach sustainability. I live some of these things. I share experiences. And it's not that I'm trying to convert people. It's that there's just so many misperceptions around this. And so I'm trying to say, look, you are either dealing with an outdated understanding, or you're hearing it from people who've, heard it through the internet that this is what it's really like to live with this technology. Let me tell you what it's really like, right? Because being an early adopter, you get a lot of questions. So I'm just kind of naturally continuing that conversation. People are curious, and then when they hear what it's really like, about the fact they can save money, about maybe what some of the side benefits are, or the fact that the technology even works, and usually outperforms a fossil fuel alternative, that's how you get real action.
Right. I think that it's just people just don't know what they don't know, right? And it's all about awareness. So if you are in contact with someone who's sharing with you new information, you're like, wow. And then you can, even if you are an agent that has an SUV, gas guzzling, and you live in an old home, just being exposed to kind of this information, you can think, oh, well, should I be changing some of these things? And, I don't think that people need to be perfect. It's just about progress. It's just about being authentic. It's just about sharing what matters to you and sharing your values with people. And I think that that's attractive. That's going to attract people to you.
Yeah, no, and all of those changes as you go along, that's your journey, that's your
Yeah.
storytelling. So as you, and especially around the EV, I'm so excited to see more of my colleagues driving EV now. But I can tell you, I swear that like in 2018, I was like the only one that I knew that was a green agent in this country that drove an EV. We had a lot of hybrid drivers, and my problem with it was just that they would say, I can't drive electric now because it's too expensive, or because the technology is not there. And my only thing was that I came into this industry already driving electric. I worked in marine biology. I did not make a realtor salary or any kind of, a great salary in marine biology. But, there were incentives and things around at that time that I was able to use and that are still around in some states. And now we have a used EV market. So all I encourage people to do is this, and especially when we are as green agents, when we say things like that, it continues that narrative that everything is expensive or undoable. And I just tried to say, my first electric car cost me $2,000, right? And then I saved $300 plus a month on fuel. And it had an 80-mile range, but I drove 20,000 miles a year selling real estate and did it successfully. Very rarely had to fast charge in public, maybe twice a month. But I had a home charger, which a lot of agents would have. And then when I did move up to a Tesla, I didn't pay anything near what people would think they did. And I'm saving $3,600 a year in fuel costs compared to, an equivalent gas car. So it's just changing the narrative that all Teslas aren't six figures, and that you can actually do some quite amazing drives, in a sub 100-mile car. And when you get up to 200 plus miles, I mean, it's a game changer.
Yeah, I think that technology, people are all about convenience too, right? So sometimes I think that there's a misconception, or maybe it was the fact that, EVs were a little more inconvenient just because you couldn't pull up to a gas station. If you were running out of battery power.
Yes.
But how have you seen that change over the last few years?
Well, so I think definitely a combination of two things. One, we have not anymore since COVID, everything's gotten more expensive, especially the used car market. But for a while there, we had very affordable used cars, so used electric vehicles. So you had a lot of cars you could get for $5,000 or less, somewhere around there. And they could do quite a bit. And then now we just have a plethora of 200-mile plus EVs. And so people are getting them, they're trying them out, and they're realizing that they work. Mm-hmm. That is really what's changing, because here's the bottom line with a lot of this stuff is that it works completely different than your fossil fuel technology. I think it's inconvenient to drive a gas car because you can't fuel up at home. I was always one of those people that I would realize that I needed to fill up when I was already late to a meeting, right? That was my entire life, late to work or school or whatever it was. I was low on fuel when I needed to be somewhere, and I would have to stop. And even though, yes, you can fuel it up kind of quickly, I think EVs are super convenient because every morning I leave with full battery because I charge when I sleep. Right. So I didn't think about it. That's convenience.
Yeah, that is convenient. See, it's just a shift of mindset for you to, okay, but what about for people who want to go on a road trip? What do you do then?
Perfect question. So we're in Atlanta, and I remember for 8 years now, we've had the question, what do you do when you want to go to Florida? And yes, in a limited range EV, that would have been a little more of a challenge. But since my car was free, I used to just tell people, well, I use some of my tax credit money and I buy a plane ticket. But now with Tesla, I mean, in 2018, my husband is from Brooklyn, New York. And so in 2018, we went home to Brooklyn for Thanksgiving. And the Tesla supercharger network is just flawless. Again, it's just a whole experience. Tesla's done an amazing job, creating an Apple-like experience. No issues, right? And in my car, supercharging is free, so I don't have to pay for gas for the road trip. Super easy, super fun. And you stop on equivalent routes of when you would want to go to the bathroom, get out and stretch, have a meal, and you're charging in that time. So it's just kind of breaking it up. And I know some people say, well, I like to drive, 10 hours straight. Well, I'm not that person. And, and I think there are fewer people that drive 10 hours straight. I think most people are stopping for breaks. But it's a lot easier than people think. Yeah.
It's really just about being open to different possibilities. And when
it is fear. Yeah. It's fear of what's different. That's what we are as humans. We don't understand change, and we're scared of it. And I understand it. Range anxiety, as they call it, is real. But I just say you got to get out there. Use the PlugShare app. The game changer is having a 240 volt home charger that really does change things. Although plenty of people live off a regular wall outlet, but and there are plenty of other technologies like this, from heat pumps, right? Air source heat pumps. People still think about resistive heating and how inefficient that is, but new today's air source heat pumps do very well even in cold climates. And you have to just understand how a heat pump works and thermodynamics to understand that, yes, even when it's cold out, there is heat in the air, right? The only time there is no heat is when we have 0 Kelvin, which if we're 0 Kelvin on Earth, we're all dead.
My solar guy was just telling me about a heat pump water heater and how much more efficient it is. And it's not even more expensive. It just works a different way. And it's not using the electricity, because he was saying, people want to get solar, and then they think, well, I'm getting solar, so I can just have everything electric, and I can leave the lights on all the time and not, worry about it. And
you need to still worry about efficiency, because the less efficient you are, the more solar you have to have, right?
And you have to get a much bigger system.
Yeah,
So,
no, I have a heat pump water heater in my house, and it uses the same technology as a heat pump for heating or cooling your house. And so the interesting thing is that if you have just a simple like coil heater, then you're literally heating up water or air by heating a coil with electricity. But when you use a heat pump, you're using a refrigerant to collect heat. So the math is, depending on the heat pump, it's usually you can get 3 to 4 times as much energy per kilowatt hour of electricity used. So you just slashed, your energy usage, by 75% potentially. So like with a heat pump water heater, they are more expensive up front. But for example, last year we bought one, we got it on sale. We had a coupon at Home Depot. We had a $300 tax credit, and we had a $250 Georgia Power rebate. So in the end, that thing cost us $300.
wow.
And then the really cool thing, we switched from gas. So we're able to get rid of a combustible, dangerous appliance in our house. But the fuel cost for us is actually pretty equivalent. So it's saving about as much money in gas as it is using electricity. But if you were just to go from a regular electric water heater, you'd probably save $400 or more per year. So that's why a lot of times you'll see that they say it pays itself back in 2 years. And most of them have a full 10-year warranty.
Oh my gosh, you should have your own podcast about about how homeowners can save money with all these green features, because I didn't know that, and that's so helpful. Think about the post you could make about that and how you can talk about that with people, and they'll say, wow, I had no idea, and then it has them stay connected with you. That's great.
Yeah, certainly.
I love
You
that.
should look into one.
Yeah, I am. I mean, we're building a house. I just yes, if it were up to me solely, we would have everything green and efficient. I just have to convince my husband to agree to some of this stuff. So,
Well, so the other really cool thing, like when we talk about changing to renewables, is about peak demand, right? So, an electric water heater is using easily 2,000 watts when it's heating. And of course, if we do a tankless electric water heater, I mean, that's even more wattage than that, because it's having to heat it really, really fast. But a heat pump water heater, if you're running it only in the heat pump mode, ours is about 300 watts of power. So, I mean, a fraction. So you're able to, not only you're reducing your overall usage, but also your peak power.
okay, wait a second, because I thought that tankless water heaters were more efficient than a big tank. Is that not true?
So the issue is that because they don't have a tank, they're not heating the water up and then it's losing heat right over time and then they're having to reheat. They are efficient in the fact that they only are using energy when they're actively heating, right? When you're demanding water. But the issue is whether it's gas or it's electric, they are having to use a lot of it all at once because they're having to heat very, very, very quickly. And so especially when we're talking about electricity, when we start talking about electrifying, multiple appliances, you're talking about what is the load on your panel, what is the load also on the grid. And so if we do a lot of these homes, so being able to balance things out with, things like heat pumps that are more efficient in that way, you're able to keep your peak power down.
So who is your resource for all of this kind of information? Do you have like a green HVAC person that is in your network, or did you learn all this by yourself?
I do actually. I have some great, green focused vendors, but a lot of this has been years of me living this, right? So as I've explored the different technologies, all the different numbers, like in an EV, it's again, I mean, I kind of have an engineering brain, and my husband's in tech. So, this is kind of nerd stuff for us, but most of it has been from living it, going through it ourselves. We monitor our energy and our air quality in our house. We have a smart home here as well. So just seeing all this information, and again, talking to people, talking to manufacturers as well. I mean, they love talking to realtors. They really want to speak with those of us who are connected to get, things out to people. So, they listen as well, because again, there's just not many of us that really get it.
Well, what have you seen? What do you have any stories to share about how consumer demand has changed? I mean, or what do you think about how COVID has played a part in that as far as?
Yeah, so, one, air quality, there's more attention to air quality. I would say the conversation is more on schools, but people have started to look at how their home was affecting them as they stayed in it, almost 2 years at this point. And then renovations, I've seen a lot of conversations about, healthier, lower VOC, low, no formaldehyde, renovations, so that's a conversation. But, CO2, there was I think it was on CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Channel, their version of ABC. But there was a thing where they actually put monitors in people's houses where they were working because of COVID to show like the CO2 levels. So there's a lot of conversation around CO2, what it does to you, and the fact that it also is indicative of possible spread of COVID and, other contagions. So you have a lot of home health concerns, but then growing concern about energy costs, because we are at home more, we're not, especially if you have like a time of use plan, you're not gone during the day like you used to be. And resiliency factor, right? So what about, strong internet, is it going to be backed up when the power goes down? When the power goes down, what in my house still has power? And then just overall resiliency. I know you guys have issues with the wildfires in California. Our issue in Atlanta and what we will have as climate change continues is increasingly strong storms, so winds, but even more so rain total. So it's not even just when we get hurricanes, but we will have, huge storms that come through just because that's how the weather is now, that will dump inches of rain within like a very short period of time. And so things are flooding, more people are getting water in their basements. We have a lot of terrain, a lot like, not mountains like California, but we are very hilly like California. So we have a lot of homes on basements here in the Atlanta area. And so people have to think about drainage around their homes. They have to think about their gutters and their roofs. And getting more resilient. So maybe upgrading the size of their gutter, upgrading their drainage system as these storms are just getting worse and worse every year.
Yeah, as you're talking about that, I'm just thinking, wow, there's so much content there that you could be sharing with people to help them out as an agent. Not, because nobody wants a flooded basement. That's just, you're going to get mold everywhere. Nobody wants mold, right? So I know that you've done a lot of work with the association. How have you seen the association change in the last few years, or what changes have been made in your MLS, for example?
Nothing really in our MLS. I will say that, we had a green movement. I was not an agent back before the crash, but, around that 2007, 8, 9 period, we did have a green committee, and we had some agents that were really leading the conversation, and they were successful in getting green, a pretty fair extent of green information into our MLS, or at least fields. So we've had those, not really heavily used. In fact, people incorrectly use HERS at times and put a 0 in there, and it's like 0 is an actual score, not non-applicable. So that is already there. What I will say from an association level is that, our Atlanta association has done really well. Again, I showed up, I got plugged into association leadership very early in my career, almost at the beginning, around professional excellence, and again, raising awareness of agents about what was already here, what was on the ground, the organizations, the homeowners that were already doing this stuff. This was, again, not future, it was already here, and we weren't serving this part of the community. So over 6 years, we've done, we brought the green designation in, we've created local CE classes with, our local versions of Green Raiders and some other organizations. Just this year, we finally got our governmental affairs committee to approve, and our board approved it, a position to support access to solar as a property right, because in Georgia, we aren't even a free market in solar. We don't support it. We're not a free market. We're like the opposite. We really try to limit it. And so that's not a realtor value, right? We don't like for property rights to be limited. We don't like for excessive fees to be charged and taxed to people based on what they do on their property. So here in Georgia, we really didn't have net metering. They did open a small program for 5,000 homes and businesses that filled up very fast, so that's gone. And then of course we protect the utilities way too much here in their bottom line. So it's been a slow moving thing, but that's going to be the next thing for us, is having the realtors advocate for more fair access to solar, for net metering, removing really small caps on, what people can put on their home, community solar, microgrid, stuff like that. So that's all stuff that realtors can be involved with. But what I will tell you, that success didn't happen on its own. That only happened because I've been relentless, right? And so by being relentless, showing up, I got people around me. I've had discussions and built relationships with other leaders. So the people like in charge, and I'm now part of that, that body as well. But they have buy-in, they believe in it, they want it. And so that's exciting to see on the Atlanta level. On NAR, I can't take credit for what's happened up there. I'm now part of the sustainability advisory group, but there are some folks that have just done amazing stuff for a decade or more. And so there's massive stuff happening up there. At our state level, it's like a dodging, but I will tell you, I won the Evergreen Award this year, and they are very happy about that. We will have both state leadership and Atlanta Realtor leadership at the ceremony for that award, and they've shared it on their social medias. So for me, nothing gets more progress than recognition from NAR, right? And so this is an award that I'm sharing with definitely my local association, because they have been there doing the work with me. But I'm using it as leverage and a catapult for what's next.
Yeah, congratulations. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing, because what do you think it's going to take for the majority of realtors to even start using some of those green fields? They work so hard to put them in the MLS, but what do you think is the limiting factor for this to kind of go to the next level and have more?
I hate to sound like defeatist and say that realtors are never going to really get on board and full, but let's just be real. Even non-green fields are incorrectly filled out by a lot of people. So there's just certain people that are never going to come along, never be professional, never be competent. I think the long-term solution is what Green Building Registry is doing in Portland. They have an amazing website and the public can search it. They have a lot of these certificates for LEED and HERS ratings in their systems. I think the more permanent solution is populating that data. So getting the API from Green Building Resource into more MLSs. They've had the conversation with our main MLS here in Georgia, and we have a very green supportive CEO here. So it's promising, but he's pushed back at this point just because he doesn't think there's enough. There's only about 46,000 homes, which I think is a lot. There's about 46,000 homes in Georgia that they have records on. But to me, that's the long-term solution is pre-populating, green certificates, HERS scores, and eventually solar array information. And then of course we can fill in some of the other stuff. But I think at a minimum, if we start getting solar array info, and then energy certificates and HERS scores, then we can really start getting better about, writing white papers and improving a lot of this stuff and tracking it too.
Well, right. And just to make it convenient for people to it's already there, right?
Correct.
Have you heard of Realty Sage? That's a platform too. Yeah, they have 150,000 agents who have signed up for their referral network. So, there's a lot of agents out there that want to, market to this niche. And I think that that's great, but there's 2 million agents. So it's not, it's not that many agents.
I'm pleasantly surprised to hear it's 150,000. My thing that I worry about, and I mean this kindly, and because I think that maybe it'll help kind of get some people to think about it. I just, in Atlanta, when we have classes on this, people are hungry for it. They are looking for that niche to break into. We will never succeed in any niche if we come from a selfish, self-serving place. And there are just a lot of people that just want to put their name on a list because, they feel that maybe the list is limited, so they have a higher percentage to get in there. But, the thing is, again, I go back, find a way to start doing some of this stuff, start living it, because it's hard for us to preach it if we aren't trying it ourselves, right? And then it just becomes a lot more easy to talk about. It becomes more natural. Everything becomes easy. But, we should also lead by example. How can we be encouraging people to live a green lifestyle if we aren't trying to do it ourselves? And it doesn't mean a whole, green lifestyle. It's wherever you're able to do. And again, because you're going to find that people are going through the same struggle or the same success as you in that area. And that's the downfall, but the benefit of sustainability is it's just a big, big arena. But find a piece that you really want to focus on. Live it so you can talk from place of experience, and then connect with folks. So the other thing is you're going to find out is that people are like each other in a lot of different ways. So you'll start finding other little ways that you connect with people. And those are communities that you could potentially connect through to build those deeper relationships and maybe even, become a client eventually. So we just have to think about it from a more holistic view about being a part of community and giving back rather than just trying to extract value and like catch people, and sell them a house.
That's such good advice. I really truly believe that, because you work kind of from the inside and you come from a place of service. Really, probably, a lot of people get into this business because of the glitz and glam, that they think real estate agents are going to make a ton of money. Then they quickly realize that it's a lot of hard work, right? And if you come from a place of service and you're really just trying to help people and you put them first, the money will come.
Yes.
But if you are after the money, people can see that, and it's almost just like the desperation that people can feel around you if you really are trying to get the sale.
They can smell it. They can smell
it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christoper. This was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. How can people get a hold of you?
Yes, so you can find me on Instagram. It's Matos_Rogers. And you can also, I will say, Google me. You can find all my stuff that way. Christoper Matos-Rogers. And you'll find a whole slew of stuff. I am not a secret agent.
Yes, well, and I know that you are on a panel at the NAR conference coming up too, that is about why add green to your team. Is that what it's called?
Yes. So that'll be in 2 days from when we're recording this episode. So Friday the 12th at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So I'm excited to be on that panel with Craig and a bunch of others.
Well, congratulations for that. And thank you so much for all the work that you do. It was so great talking to you.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you learned something new that will inspire you to think about your branding and how you can market yourself a little differently. If you enjoyed this episode, then you're going to love what I have for you, because you don't need to wait to go get extra certifications or to grow and expand your network to get started attracting those new leads right now. You can simply begin by talking about wellness real estate trends and what you've learned on this podcast with others. This is pretty interesting stuff that no one has heard about, and I have all the tools that can make it even easier for you. Wellness Real Estate Magazine is a brand new wellness lifestyle magazine, and it's the only magazine that brings health and home together. We educate readers on industry trends and how to create a healthier home environment, written by industry experts around the country. And we have 3 covers to choose from: Wellness RE, Healthy Home, and Wellness at Home, so you can easily find one that aligns with your unique brand and messaging. These magazines are the perfect done-for-you tools that help you not only stay top of mind, but they educate and engage your audience, which positions you as an industry expert. Differentiate yourself and grow your brand the easy way. Learn more at healthyhomemedia.com.